Well, hi there. Welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on EWTN Radio. I am Jerry Usher, along with Debbie Georgiani, our producer Ace McKay. Happy Easter, everyone. We are so blessed to be in this beautiful Easter season, Debbie, and we are looking forward to having a conversation very much related to the Easter season.
Well, we both love the Shroud of Turin, and we're going to be talking with Bill Snyder. And I'll tell you what, this is interesting, folks. You've got to really pay attention and listen and learn. This is going to be, I believe, a spiritually life-changing conversation. It is pre-recorded, so no phone calls, please. But Jerry, if you will do the proper introductions, I say we dive right in because we've got a lot to cover on the Shroud.
Yeah, if you're not familiar, maybe you've never heard of the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't, you're in for a treat. If you have, you're going to learn a lot more about it because it is an amazing item and one that has been studied and studied and studied, and definitely is the burial cloth of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Bill Snyder, as Debbie said, is with us. He has produced a new documentary on the Shroud entitled Who Do You Say I Am? It's a fresh exploration of the science of the Shroud through the lens of faith, and it was released this past February 22nd, Ash Wednesday. So, Bill, it's a blessing to have you with us. Welcome.
Jerry and Debbie, it's wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, Bill, we want to thank you for the great documentary, but Bill, for our listeners, because we have new listeners each and every time we do this wonderful show, Take Two. Share with all of our listeners kind of the background of the Shroud. I mean, it has taken an incredible journey to this day, and how amazing is that? Maybe, if you can kind of capture that for all of us, I think that would be helpful for the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I learned a ton about the Shroud of Turin producing and directing this documentary. And the Shroud really is the most studied relic in the church because it has its own field of science dedicated to its study called syndenology. And it's just fascinating. We say in the film, or one of the Shroud experts says in the film, that we really don't know the history of the Shroud and its travels through time because of all the conflicting reports of where it has been and what it has done. We didn't have the internet back, in the time of Christ, and so we don't really know with certainty where it was. But we do have lots of incredible stories and evidence about its travels and how it got from Jerusalem, where Jesus was crucified and died and rose from the dead, to Turin, where it has been since 1578. And it's just a fascinating thing. I think the most fun story that I can highlight about the Shroud and its travels was when it was buried in a wall by a bishop because he was afraid that a pagan successor to the king Abgar would basically take the Shroud and do something weird with it. So he buried it in a wall, and it was forgotten there for 500 years. And around the year 500, a lady appears to another bishop, Bishop Eulalius, who says, "You're under attack by the Persians. If you take this Shroud out of the wall, and you display it, you are going to repel the Persians." And he's like, "What Shroud?" So that was fascinating to learn. Again, do we know these things with certainty? But it was just fascinating. So what does he do? He takes the Shroud out of the wall. She tells him where it is buried in the wall. He pulls it out. The Persians are repelled. So it's fascinating. I mean, there's incredible history, incredible folklore around the Shroud that we can just delve into and unpack and grow in faith. I think that's the most impressive thing for me is how much this has helped me grow in faith. And I'm not an expert on the Shroud. Let me just preface that. I am not an expert on the Shroud. I'm a producer of a documentary about the Shroud. We have two wonderful experts in the film, Richard Bernacci and Brian Walsh, who are the experts on the Shroud, and they're fascinating. So I've had the blessing to be able to talk to them at length, and so I learned a ton about the Shroud, but I'll just say straight up, I am not an expert on the Shroud of Turin.
Well, Bill Snyder is with us here, a pre-recorded Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Granted, okay, you're not an expert. You said you learned a whole lot about this. How did you get in touch with Richard and Brian and bring them into the project?
Yeah. So what's amazing is that the Holy Spirit arranges these conversations. So my co-executive producer, Ken Paholsky at Fiat Ministry Network, and I were having a conversation because Brian, who he is good friends with, was looking at cataloging some of his work. He is getting older, and he's been studying the Shroud. He is the executive producer of he's the executive director of the Shroud of Turin Center in Richmond, Virginia. And so he was just doing some recordings over Zoom, trying to catalog some of his work and whatnot with Kent. And I turned around to them and I said, well, hey, we've got some fancy camera equipment. Why don't we see if we can actually do a legitimate documentary? And so that's how it came to be. I had a Zoom call with both Brian and Kent, and we decided to do the film. And the Holy Spirit just kind of led the conversations from there and arranged all of the timing to, do the filmings and do everything from there. So that's really how it began. And, it's a beautiful testament because Brian is so faith-filled. Richard, the other expert, is so faith-filled that we really let that shine through our production, right? Like we let that shine through. We didn't hide our Catholicity. Like many things, on the Shroud do. A lot of the secular productions you'll see on like History Channel, they hide that. We were like, well, we're not going to hide this. So,
right. Hang on just a second. Bill Snyder is with us here. Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and you. Inviting you to sit this one out in terms of phone calls, but don't sit it out in terms of listening. Soak in all that Bill has to share with us about the Shroud of Turin. It is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ here on this Easter Monday. We are celebrating the fact that he is risen, and we're going to have a whole lot more for you in just a minute, so stay here.
Well, we hope you're enjoying this broadcast. It is a pre-recorded episode of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We have Bill Snyder with us. He's the producer of the newest documentary on the Shroud of Turin. And if you've listened to Take Two for a while, you will know that Jerry and I are big supporters of the Shroud of Turin. So just make sure you really pay attention to this wonderful conversation we're having with Bill. And just before we get back to it, I just wanted to share EWTN offers the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass from our Lady of the Angels Chapel live every morning at 8 Eastern Time, right after the Sunrise Morning Show. So don't miss out. We can send a link to your email inbox every day. Visit EWTN.com and click on subscribe.
Okay, very good. Again, Bill Snyder is with us, and we're talking about his new documentary, which debuted actually on February 22nd. It is about the Shroud of Turin, and I think, Bill, maybe the next best place that we could go would be, I'm just going to throw it to you kind of open-ended here. If you can pick out some of the more fascinating facts about this and just get into 2 or 3 of them real briefly. We've got the rest of the hour to do that, but there's so much rich information about this, and so tell us what is some of the most fascinating parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the amazing things I learned again about the history of the Shroud was that it has been basically in Turin since 1578. So that's where we get the Shroud of Turin from. But a few people don't know that it was actually sent into hiding during World War II and sent to Montevieni because Hitler was seeking the artifacts, the religious artifacts, and he was trying to get his hands on anything that, was of Christ, that was said to be of Christ, because he thought it would give him more and more power, right? So they sent the Shroud into hiding, and there's a couple of different stories about it. Again, we don't know exactly what took place, but one of the stories says it was hidden in a pillar in this cathedral there, and then another says it was actually used underneath the altar as an altar cloth. And when the Germans came into the church, they see all these monks there praying in the church, and they're like, let's not disturb them. We're looking for these artifacts, but let's not disturb them. And they walk right out. So there it is. The Holy Spirit, God protecting this beautiful relic, and it's been protected from wars and fires, and it's just fascinating how God has kept this in the world, so that it can now be studied, right? Like we've made it through many of the turbulent times, and it survived history up until now. And so now that modern science can begin to look at this, right, and begin to delve into the blood type that is on the shroud and the pollens that are on the shroud and all the different, scientific evidence that's on the shroud that lends itself to its authenticity, the credence to its authenticity. Like that, to me, is truly miraculous that it's around, and we're now able to study this from a scientific perspective. And oh, by the way, the science, when we look at it from a theological perspective, like we do in this film, begins to help us deepen our own faith. Like, wow, I can't believe that God, did that for me, and that He not only died, but He conquered death. He rose from the dead, which is really what the shroud is. It's an image of the resurrection. Those who believe that it's authentic, it's an image of the moment of resurrection.
Yeah. Go ahead, Deb.
I was just going to say, Bill, let's kind of go back a little bit, because I've been in religious education for over 30 years, and we always, in religious education, taught about the Shroud of Turin. I've always believed in it from day one, even though some scientists and stuff said, there was a problem with this, or there was a problem with this part of it, or, it didn't quite add up to the time of Jesus's death. And, and so there was always this question if it truly was the authentic burial cloth of Jesus. But I've always believed personally that it is. And so kind of take us back on the twists and turns, ups and downs of the Shroud of Turin, because I find it fascinating that it's just gone through the washer machine. And, here we are today. I mean, can we just finally accept that it is the burial cloth of Christ?
I believe it is. Both Brian and Richard say they believe it is, right? Like in the film, they say they believe it is. And the evidence is overwhelming. From a scientific perspective, can you definitively say that it is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ? Brian would actually say no. But he follows that up with a statement. He says, just because we don't know that now doesn't mean we won't know it in the future. And what I want to highlight about that is that they have dedicated their lives. I mean, especially Brian and Richard have dedicated their lives to the study of this, and syndenology exists for one reason: to prove its authenticity. Right? Like all the different fields of science, biology, they exist to prove the biology of living organisms. Right? Syndenology is its own study of the shroud. It exists for one reason: to study the shroud to prove its authenticity. And so I would say that while we cannot make the scientific definitive, yes, this is totally 100% authentic, we can, with eyes of faith, look at this and say the evidence is absolutely overwhelming that it is. And we're just looking for that one thing that tells us absolutely it is. And that the biggest conflict which you mentioned, or kind of alluded to there, was with the dating of the shroud and the carbon dating that happened in 1988. And one of the very interesting things is that Brian just released a study in the Journal of Archaeology, I believe, in 2020 on the inconsistencies and inaccuracies of the carbon dating. So he redid a study on the carbon dating with one of his friends, Larry Schwalbe. And it's, again, very recent, like 3 years ago recent. And so he talks about that in the film and why the dating of the shroud was off. And then we present some other possibilities as to why it might be off as well. But the latest research is in this film. And so, again, while they can't, say with a definitive, flag in the ground that this is 100%, when you look through the eyes of faith, as we say in the film, this is your salvation. This is what God did for you. He suffered and died for you, and the evidence is right here. So take a look and look with your eyes of faith at it, because when you do, it's worthy of belief. I mean, and you've believed it for years, and I certainly have believed it for years. Doing this made me even believe it more, and so I am encouraging everyone to look at it through the eyes of faith and not just through the eyes of science, because it's so important that we as Catholics look at this and all relics and miracles through the eyes of faith and science, because when it comes together they blend, and it's a beautiful thing.
You're listening to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on EWTN Radio. Happy Easter to all of you. It's Easter Monday. We are celebrating the resurrection of Christ and talking about, we're celebrating, I think, in a beautiful, grand way today, talking with Bill Snyder, the producer of a new documentary on the Shroud of Turin. Bill, I think I counted 4 times you said eyes of faith. And before you said it the first time, I was thinking we have to look at this through eyes of faith. And, this may or may not be an applicable question, but how is this maybe similar to Eucharistic miracles? We these go under the microscope. These get studied. Can scientists say definitively it's the flesh and blood of Jesus? Well, probably not. But it takes eyes of faith to believe things like this ultimately. Although, like you said, maybe we'll know for sure regarding the shroud at some point in the future. But am I off base or on base? Maybe comparing this to Eucharistic miracles and how they're studied.
It's one of the things that didn't make the film, but we have it on tape, is the correlation between Eucharistic miracles and the shroud. Because when you look at Eucharistic miracles, they all come back with the same blood type, AB. Every Eucharistic miracle that is studied has always come back with the blood type being AB, whether it is the gold standard Eucharistic miracle, which is considered the Eucharistic miracle of Lanciano, Italy, or more recent ones, like I think Buenos Aires, right? That was pretty recent under the pastorship of Cardinal Bergoglio, now Pope Francis. So every single one of them come back with this blood type AB. And Brian says in the film, he goes, think about this from a theological perspective. AB is the universal receiver. Through science, we know that AB is the universal receiver, meaning it can take blood from anybody. Well, what did Jesus do? He received all of the sins from all of us, from every man, woman, and child on the planet. And he offered sacrifice on behalf of every single person, right? And he brought us to the ability to have access to heaven. Wow. Like, that's mind-blowing, right? To think about that. That the blood type, even Christ's blood type, lends itself to belief and a deeper reality for us. Like, wow, he was able to take my sins into his, and or into his body on the cross, into his blood on the cross, and redeem me. And oh, by the way, not just it's not just my blood type that lines up with him; it's everybody's blood type, because he's the universal receiver. And it's wild. It's absolutely wild.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Deb, did you have something?
Well, I guess as I'm listening to you, Bill, I agree with Jerry. I mean, I think it would have been great to also see that in the documentary, to relate it to the Eucharistic miracles. But we're in this place where, even if you present, complete scientific evidence, people still don't believe. I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's like, what is it going to take for you to truly believe? And, I think it was fascinating in the documentary about the fact that the cloth, the person that was wrapped in this cloth was only there for a short amount of time. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. I mean, it's really incredible. And even if it was, let's just say for a moment, it's not the absolute, exact burial cloth of Jesus, the things we can learn from it and to just confirm what we believe as Catholic Christians, I think is paramount. I mean, it's amazing. And it bothers me so much because I've studied the Shroud for many, many years, and I've seen it go all different ways. And then now this wonderful latest documentary that you have produced, which we're so grateful for. I have to tell you, I just pray that people say, okay, I'm going to look this way and I'm going to believe. Even if you don't 100% believe, but at least look this way. What do you say to that, Bill?
I say you're spot on. I say you're spot on, because that's what we want people to do. Again, I'm going to use maybe it's for the fifth time in the interview, but you got to look through eyes of faith at this evidence, because it is overwhelming. And, I certainly believe it is. I don't think anybody walking out of our documentary or walking out of watching it has any other takeaway other than that it is Christ. And one of the amazing things that we had the opportunity to do was actually interview people who just walked into an exhibit on the Shroud. We just asked them, who do you say it is? After looking at all this evidence, which is overwhelming, who do you say it is? And every single person we interviewed said, it's Jesus, or most likely it's Jesus. And we put those, man on the street little interviews in the end of the documentary. And I think it's the most powerful part of the documentary, because what ends up happening is it's like, here's all this evidence, here's all the science, okay, the experts say it is, but now the people who have just walked through this exhibit and seen a replica shroud and this replica crucifix, you walk out of it and you go, there's no other conclusion for a person who is believing in God or in Christ, a Christian, to walk out of there going, it's somebody else. I mean, what other person that we know was crowned with thorns?
Bill Snyder, hang on one second. In fact, I want to stay on that a little bit about the crucifixion, what we can learn about the crucifixion of Jesus from the Shroud of Turin. Also, what we can learn about is resurrection. It's an artifact that the technology can't repeat what is on the Shroud, folks. It's miraculous. We're talking with Bill Snyder about that here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Stick around. Well, happy Easter. He is risen. Easter Monday here. A previously recorded episode of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We hope and pray, and I have to suspect you are getting a lot out of this discussion with Bill Snyder about the Shroud of Turin. He is the director of a new documentary on that. And if you just came in partway through the show, you can always go to the archives at take2show.com or get the podcasts from EWTN.com. And please, if you know somebody who would benefit from listening to this, especially maybe a skeptic or a non-believer, point them in the direction of not only this program, but the documentary itself. And Bill, before we continue our conversation, is there a place right now where people can get information? I presume you've got, must have a website or social media or something. How do people learn more about how they can view this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go over to our website, which is very simply patchworkheart.org, you're going to see a tab at the very top of that website that says Shroud Film. Click that, and all the information about how you can get it and how you can bring it to your parish and have an event at your parish with the documentary as well is all on that page.
Great. Okay, well, as mentioned going into the break there, I think it would be helpful to dive into a little bit more of what's on the shroud and what it tells us about crucifixion, which was, of course, a horrible way to die, and Jesus did accept that death willingly on our behalf. But as you and so many others have studied the shroud, can you kind of give us some of the finer details about what crucifixion would have been like?
Yeah, actually, let's really start with the scourging, right? There's over 159 scourge marks on the front of the body, and I believe 215 or 14 on the back of the body of the man on the shroud, which was pretty commonplace for criminals to be scourged prior to, execution, because it was a way to further humiliate them, number one, but number two, beat them up, so that they would die in the most painful way. So, Christ experienced that. And you see all of the whipping marks all over this, over 300, right? And when you look at that, the scientists are able to see that they now match up with the flagellums or these whips that the Romans used. They actually found the dumbbell-shaped whips that they used on Christ during Roman excavations recently. So you can see on the body this pattern, this dumbbell shape that was digging into Christ's flesh from the whip. Right? They were like little bones or metal balls that would dig in and then they would rip it out of the body. And so that's evidence there on the shroud that happened, right? And when you look at the shroud, you see all of these markings, all of these whip markings from that. In addition to that, obviously, you see the flow of blood that is coming out of his side, out of his hand. And, oh, by the way, as I mentioned right before the break, that crown of thorns, right? What other person in recorded history do we know of that was crowned with thorns when he was executed? None. We know from the shroud, we see all of the points where the crown of thorns dug into his head. So this was excruciatingly painful. And as Brian says in the documentary, the word excruciating means from the cross. So you can't get any more painful than from the cross, and there's the word excruciating. So when you study this, you see that what would happen is this whipping would make you feel like you're dying of thirst, because all the blood and the edema fluid is coming out of your body, and then you're walked to this Golgotha, this place of execution, and you're nailed to the cross. And Brian does an amazing job explaining in the film about the nails through the hands, and I encourage people to really pay attention to that, because where they put the nails went through the wrist bone, right? It's not like what you see on a crucifix, that you might have hanging in your home. It went through the wrist bone, through the hands on a downward trajectory, so that it could affix you to the cross. Otherwise, you may be able to rip your hands off of the cross, or as he says, a good gust of wind could blow and blow you off of the cross. So they knew all of this. they had studied this like 200 years prior to the execution of Christ. They had a lot of practice, figuring out how to cause the most painful death to somebody. Again, excruciating from the cross. And we see all of this on the shroud. I mean, it's all evidenced right there for you on the shroud.
Mm-hmm. I have to tell you, Bill, my blood just starts, I can feel the heart palpitations. I start to shake when I think about this because, you were talking about the lashes, over 350, 100, you said 159 on the front of the body and then over about 214, 15 to the back. That's over 350. He was beaten beyond recognition. Nobody can endure this. Most people, let's face it, they bump their elbow or they get a paper cut and they're whining about it. I mean, this is just brutal. The Roman crucifixion, they delighted in torturing the people, and so we can learn so much from the shroud. Thank goodness I had a pastor that I worked for that always promoted the Shroud of Turin, and so we always communicated that to religious education participants who wanted to learn more or even go through sacraments, because it's important to know what he did for us. And folks, if you're listening right now, we're speaking to Bill Snyder. He is the producer of the new documentary on the Shroud of Turin entitled, Who Do You Say I Am? Now, Bill, so it's brutal, and we're going to get all the details of that in the documentary, but it is Easter Monday. He is risen, and you talk a lot about, in the documentary, about the energy of the resurrection. Can we dive into that? Can we switch to that part now? Because I find that to be extremely fascinating for the point, to the point that we can enter into this unbelievable mystery and an amazing gift of the resurrection.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's transition there, especially on Easter Monday here. So, the resurrection is a amazing event if we look at it through the eyes of the shroud. What scientists say is that it would take about 8 billion watts of energy to recreate the image on the shroud, because the image and what defines an image fiber versus a non-image fiber is a very, very, very light coating of color on the outside of the cloth. So it's like tinted, this color, this amber color. And that is the only difference between an image fiber and a non-image fiber. So scientists have tried to recreate that. Can we turn an image fiber that color? And indeed, they have changed an image fiber that color by blasting 16 million watts of energy for 12 billionths of a second at a piece of fiber. Now, that's just to change one little piece of fiber that color. Imagine now creating an image of a man, front and back, 14 feet long, on a shroud, on a piece of cloth. You add all that up, you do all the math, it comes out at 8 billion watts, from 16 million to 8 billion watts to create a full image, not just a little fiber. If you then do all that math more, like Richard has, you end up realizing that it would take 11 AT&T stadiums, which is the stadium the Dallas Cowboys play, 11 of them running at peak power consumption to create the image. There aren't enough excimer lasers on the planet to create that much energy. And by the way, in 12 billionths of a second, 12 billionths of a second is how fast that flash of energy came through, because it didn't destroy the cloth, it left an image on it. And so you look at that and you go, wow, just wow, right? And so when we begin to comprehend this, we also liken it to conception. Because as scientists have studied conception, there is a similar flash. It's not as much power, obviously, but there's a similar flash. What happens at the moment of conception, when the sperm meets that egg, there's a flash, and it's been recorded. And so we talk about that there's a similar flash between the resurrection and also the beginning of our life. And it's just fascinating to me that these kind of go hand in hand with one another. It's just absolutely fascinating to me.
Bill Snyder with us, sharing so much great information about the Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. At least those of us who have the faith to believe that is what we believe. As he said, one of the gentlemen in his document, it's a brand new documentary, by the way, one of the gentlemen said, do we know right now at this time in history that definitively, without a question of any doubt, that it was Christ's burial cloth? Well, maybe not, but he said we certainly could know that in the future. But I think ultimately we have to just drop to our knees before such an amazing relic and let faith take over. But Bill, going back to, you've mentioned several things now. One of the things you mentioned was the pollens that are on the shroud and these types of things. What else? The pollens, and what else point to it being from that region of the world?
Yeah, well, you know what? Here's the thing. The pollen, for skeptics who say that this was created in the Middle Ages by some, photographic technique that we can't replicate. Let's just go there. Right. Why would there be pollen from Jerusalem on the Shroud of Turin if that's the case? In the Middle Ages, were they able to, fly there, grab the pollen, drop the pollen on the shroud at that time when they were making it? If it's a fake, I don't think so. You know what I mean? So, you look at that, and that's even more evidence, right? As Brian says, the pollens that were found on the shroud, there's two of them in particular that grow only in a 40-mile radius around the city of Jerusalem. They're on the Shroud of Turin. So, it had to have been in Jerusalem at some time. It had to originate from Jerusalem at some time there, because there's pollen on the shroud that indicates that. I mean, so just even that, lends credence to its authenticity. That, hey, here it existed here at some point in its travel.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What are your hopes for this documentary? I mean, when people, we've seen a lot of things on the shroud. There's been, snippets of it. There's been interviews. There's been things, along the way for many years. What do you want people to walk away with?
I really want people to walk away with a deeper faith, but I want people to have an interest in it. I want people to recognize that there is more to it. One of the things that Brian mentioned to us off the air was that one of the worst things that happened was when the New York Times printed on the headline of their newspaper that the shroud was a fake in 1988 after the carbon dating came out. He goes, it's hard to recover from that because people walk away going, oh, they've said that it's a fake, right? Scientists have said it's a fake. Well, no, we have to continually look at this, and we have to continually look at it through eyes of faith. And so I would just, tell people, become interested in it, watch a documentary, but the documentary doesn't stop the conversation. It only starts the conversation. So we created this study guide or this companion guide on our website that goes along with the film so that you can begin to have conversations and discussions and debates about this and begin to learn more, right? This is not just, a 53-minute long film that you put in, a box and save for next year. We're hoping that this is going to begin the conversation and really help people begin to answer that question. Who do you say I am? This is the question that we ask of everyone in the film, and it's the question we ask of all the viewers. Who do you say I am? And it's a personal and direct question. Jesus asked that question to the apostles, right? And Peter answered it. He said, "Who do you say that I am?" So he asked that of his followers today. And when you encounter this, that's what we hope. We hope you walk away with a deeper faith, but we hope you walk away with being able to answer that question, that Jesus is the Lord of your life, and that you have a deeper faith because of encountering him in this way.
Well, and Bill, you're mentioning here something very important, I think, and that is, personally, how does something like this impact me? How did it impact you? How does it impact? It probably impacts every person a little bit differently, but it has to be very profound for a lot of people. One thing I mention on this show a lot, and I try to practice this myself, is what is called in up until now, it's been called the School of the Cross, or the Schola Crucis. And I try and spend part of my daily prayer time just looking at the cross, not saying anything, letting the cross teach me and heal me and inspire me. What are you hearing from people? Is this helping people to have that deeper appreciation of what Jesus actually went through for us? What kind of things are you hearing?
Absolutely. Every person that I have talked to that has seen the film and reviewed it has just said thank you, and it has deepened my faith. And I am, excited about something being done in this way through the eyes of faith. That's not watered down. That's not, hiding the Catholicity or the faith that we have. It's actually amplifying that. So yeah, I think that people who have reviewed the film and liked the film thus far have really walked away with, I am coming to a deeper faith because of this. And it sparked me. And I can't wait to share it with others. And so that's where I'm super excited about it. And quite honestly, I'm humbled and blessed that the Lord has planted this idea on our hearts to do this. I'm humbled and blessed that we're having that response and that encounter from people.
Wonderful. I want to mention quickly before we continue our conversation with Bill Snyder on the documentary on the Shroud of Turin, which we have about 4 or 5 minutes left is all, but I want to mention EWTN Live with Father Mitch Pacwa Wednesday night, 8 Eastern Time on EWTN TV and radio. Father Mitch interviews a variety of guests seeking to teach and prepare us for evangelism. That's EWTN Live with Father Mitch Pacwa Wednesday nights at 8 Eastern Time on most of these same EWTN stations.
So, Bill, I asked you, what you want for the viewers to walk away with, the takeaway for them, and you shared it so beautifully. The reason why I asked that is because there have been a lot of impactful films and documentaries about our faith, about the life of Jesus, the saints, everything. And even church issues, right? And people come out of the theater, or they're watching it at home, and they do have that few minutes of where they can't even speak because they're trying to process it. It's so deep. It really hits them in a very special way into their soul. But then they go on with life, and they forget about stuff like that. So it's interesting how these things are in front of us. God has presented them so beautifully with Eucharistic miracles, the Shroud of Turin, and other miraculous supernatural things that we can actually see and touch sometimes and view. And these relics are precious to us as Catholic Christians. But yet it's still, people need more and more and more. So my question is, I was always curious about this. The Shroud of Turin is in Turin, Italy, correct? And is it on display, or does it just come out every once in a while? How does that work? I'm just curious because I may be planning a trip there shortly.
Yeah, so it is not on display full time. And I believe the next planned showing is in 2025, is what I want to say. So they do not put it on display quite often. I believe the last time it was out was 2002. So there, and of course it's a big deal in Turin, Italy, when they say we're going to put it on display. But currently it is not on display. But that doesn't mean you can't encounter the shroud. And I just want to quickly mention that there are beautiful replica copies, and that's what we were able to film.
Right.
So there's a traveling Man of the Shroud exhibit based in Libertyville, Illinois, that travels all over the country, and it's free for parishes to bring to their group. And so if you go to their website, which I think is colbyshrine.org, you can learn about that, and you can bring that to your parish to encounter a full-length replica. You can stand before it, and everything, and it's moving and beautiful. But yeah, as far as the Shroud of Turin in Italy, I believe the next plan showing is in 2025, and we'll find out if that happens.
And have there been any miraculous healings or any kind of anything extraordinary around the shroud? Do you know of?
That's a great question. The one that I know of was the King Abgar, if we are to believe that legend, and from apocryphal writing, obviously. But King Abgar of Edessa in the early church was said to be healed by it because St. Jude brought the shroud to Edessa, is what the legend says. So that's how it all got started, and that's in the documentary. But as far as more recent miracles and things like that, I'm not certain of that.
Well, Bill, we have less than 4 minutes. In about 2 of those minutes, if you can just get real personal here, what was your knowledge of the shroud before you launched, had the idea and launched this project, and your belief in it versus, before versus now, and how that may have changed for you personally?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up with always a deep faith and an interest in the shroud. I remember watching the Shroud documentaries on the History Channel at my grandmother's during the Easter season. We would go over there for Easter dinner or whatever, and she'd always have, a Shroud documentary on or something like that. And I always found it like missing something. Like, wait a minute, what's missing here? It's the faith aspect. And so that's the reason why I wanted to do this. And it pushed me into a deeper faith. So certainly, I had always believed it was a burial cloth of Jesus. I always believed that the resurrection happened, and this was evidence of it. But for me now, encountering the shroud and really coming close to it through interviewing amazing experts and editing this documentary, like it was completely edited by me. So I've watched this documentary probably over 150 times, putting it together, and I am blown away by the overwhelming evidence. I'm just totally blown away. I'm totally sold on it, through doing this. So hope that answers your question.
Well, it sure does. And again, we have just about 2 minutes left, and I want to once again invite people to find where you have your website online. And I know you mentioned they can get information about how to view the documentary and so forth. So repeat your website again, if you would, please.
Yeah, absolutely. It's patchworkheart.org. And click that button or the link at the very top of the screen that says Shroud Film, and you will find out all about the film. Of course, you can peruse the rest of our website and all the other ministerial stuff that we do. But yeah, check out Shroud Film. That tab up there, it's got everything that you could possibly look for on how to encounter it, get it, and everything.
Beautiful. Bill Snyder, thank you so much for being with us, the Take Two family. Thank you. Thank you for doing this project. I personally believe you're going to be blessed abundantly. That's my personal thoughts for whatever it's worth. And just thank you for being so faithful. Jerry?
Yeah, no, I echo that as well, Bill. Thank you so very, very much for spending this time with us and for undertaking this beautiful project. And there's no more perfect time to discuss this then here on Easter Monday, talking about the Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. That's what we've been talking about this hour on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Thanks to our great producer, Ace McKay, for putting this and all of our shows together, really, especially the pre-records. It is Easter Monday. We're going to be back live with you tomorrow. Debbie, in the meantime, I know we want to just continue to wish people a blessed, holy, happy Easter.
That is true. We love the Take Two family. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for listening in on this wonderful presentation on the Shroud of Turin. And until we meet again, have a beautiful and blessed day. Saint Joseph, please pray for all of us.